We're going to have a special guest today, Gabrielle Doms, who is an investment advisor, and she has a series of books. One of them, uh, The Art and Science of Real Estate Negotiation, I think is intriguing and is relevant to a topic I'd like to cover today, and that is business ethics. Is there any such thing? And one might wonder, with social media these days and everybody in a hurry to make deals and get over, um, if there's any thought at all given to business ethics. And I do wonder. And that's one of the things I'd like to explore with her. She's actually got four books. One's called Finding Profitable Deals, and another, Investing in Real Estate in Your Self-Directed IRA, which I guess is something special that she'd have to explain, and How Trends Make You a Smarter Investor. So Gabrielle's going to be joining us in a moment. One of the things I also wanted to mention at the top of this show is that for years I've had a blog, uh, the Thinking About Thinking series. And the purpose of that blog really is to reflect on not only topics that are in my books, and I've got a dozen novels, and including this mystery series, the Preacher Evan Wycliffe mystery series. Also, often on the blog, I'll review books, but I don't review them because they've just come out or because they're popular. I review them because I find them intriguing, and very often they're books that I have turned up in my own researches. The old author Samuel Johnson said you have to turn over an entire library to write a book, and that's often true. Even fiction. You have to have a collection of names, dates, and events, and they've got to be believable, but also they usually should be grounded in history. So that I think is one of the most fascinating things about being an author, is that you have to create a world. And business ethics is something, coming back to that has I've thought about for a long time. I mean, when I was growing up, my dad was a businessman. He'd been a chemical engineer in the oil business, and that later became a business executive, grew into being a business executive. And in his retirement, he actually wanted to make donations to the local college to see if they might offer courses in business ethics, because I think in many ways he really didn't see much of it. Now, he had been a Sunday school teacher, he'd been a deacon of the church, and indeed, I don't think of myself as a minister. I'm certainly not. I'm not so qualified. I was a student minister when I was in high school, and for a brief period really, but like my main character, Evan Wycliffe, in these mystery series, I had a curious mind, and when I got into college, when I learned more about the actual history of the Christian church, things like the Inquisition and the sale of indulgences and all those kinds of things, those were seriously troubling, and I became as interested in science as I was in theology and in what you might call divinity studies. Now, in my books, in these mystery series, I would say, some people have said, okay, Evan Wycliffe he's an agnostic because he has doubts. Well, I don't really know how that term works out, because I'm not sure that, agnostic, in some ways, perhaps we're not aware of the existence of God, or we get up in the morning and we say, I should pray, but I'm not sure it'll do any good. Well, how many of us feel that way? I really don't know, but I would say there's probably plenty of ministers, people of the cloth, who they have their good days and their bad days too. It's a job. And one of the things that happens in this latest book, this third book in this series, Preacher Raises the Dead, is that Evan realizes that he's really going to have to make a decision about what he wants to do with his life. He's a young man, and he's returned to farm country after studying divinity. Wouldn't say he dropped out, but he didn't. Also studied cosmology and astrophysics. Also got discouraged. Had some personal reversals. Returned to his roots in farm country, southern Missouri. And he'd been working as a guest preacher. It's hard to get work on the farm, obviously, these days. Pretty tough. So he's working as a guest minister from time to time, not much money there. But also he's something of a data driller. He knew how to use a keyboard. And I see Gabrielle has joined us. Gabrielle, I want to round out that thought. I'm going to jump right back. But suffice it to say, in this third book, Evan gets drawn into ministry full time. And it's right at the beginning of COVID. And he realizes, not only do I have to officiate weddings and, my funerals, but I also have to visit the sick and the dying. So that was the engine of the book. Welcome, Gabrielle. Now let's see, are you muted? Well, we want to
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. How are you?
Technology is wonderful when it works.
I know.
And I often feel that way about some of the software applications. It's like that some of these companies should have a motto: software that almost works.
Not a bad motto.
Well, I was teeing this up with the idea of business graphics, and I was talking about how my dad had been he was in the oil business, not as a wildcatter, fortunately, but he'd not only been a Sunday school teacher, but he'd also, I think, found a lack of business ethics in his day-to-day dealings, and that was one of the things in his retirement that he sought to do. I have explained, we've got this series of 4 books, and one of them that I found really hits the nail on the head for today, the art and science of real estate and negotiation.
Okay.
And so, just to we've talked about this before, and I have, Truth in Advertising, I have read all your books, and I did offer brief reviews of them. Perhaps not as insightful as they should have been, but Gabrielle, business ethics, and the question is it a thing? Is it even a thing anymore?
Yeah, it's a thing.
Well, okay. If you Google it, you'll find some topics on it. But I mean, is this something that people practice on a day-to-day basis? Is this something that people give some thought to?
Well, some people do and some people don't. It's not really taught. Although you probably know, I'm a real estate broker, and any broker has to abide by the code of ethics that the National Association of Realtors has, the California Association of Realtors, which I'm a part of, and also the MLSs. However, taking a course does not make ethics necessarily really accessible to a lot of people, because it's really about the person and how they, or I, or you, um, address being transparent with their clients about how they are doing business, um, and how things work. And sometimes it's a murky subject because consumers are driven a certain direction. So I'll give you an example. Um, going to Trulia or Zillow or Realtor.com, um, those are all advertising sites for realtors. Now, most consumers don't know that, and it's not advertised, and that's because the revenue for those sites comes from consumers searching around for comps that are never correct, usually vary by 30+%. Not always, but usually, often. And because of that, eventually they're going to have to figure out how to get the right values and how their home is going to sit in comparison to other sellers. That's for sellers. For buyers, it's similar. You can't really figure it out from going onto those sites. So there's a level of complexity that's added by business. I don't know how to say it, but by corporate interests, okay, that have something to sell and need to make a profit. And by the same token, the transparency as to how they're doing that is lacking. And so realtors are kind of stuck in that, because a lot of them have to show up on these sites in order to be in a consumer's, not even their consciousness, but being that the consumer can even see them. And usually only those who pay a lot of money to those sites will actually show up. So that's an ethics issue, I believe, though I'm not here to change those practices, and I probably cannot by myself anyway.
Well, certainly here in now you're in San Francisco, and
Yeah.
I'm down here in Santa Monica,
Right.
near on the left coast near the Blue Pacific. But one of the things that's been happening in our area, we're in the Ocean Park part of Santa Monica, and this has now become or have been labeled Silicon Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got quite a lot of we had ad agencies and we had some TV networks, but this has become high tech dual income young people, and of course that's the housing prices were going through the roof, as it were, before, and it's even more so now. But one of the things that started happening, actually, I was talking to one of my neighbors who is a contractor property manager, and he said that one of the things that's happening is that big corporations are buying up anything, and they're holding these as blocks of property, and it not only does it drive up prices artificially, because this is not residential demand. These are speculative investors. But it's also, they're not necessarily in the business of rehabbing this stuff. Because if you and I were to buy a home and we had any spare money, I had a boss once who said, I got my first paycheck, and he said, would you just like me to endorse this to Home Depot? I mean, you're going to put money into, especially if you, I mean, even if you rent, you want a nice fresh coat of paint. If the landlord's not going to do it, you will. I mean, you get permission, but whatever. But let's go to a different aspect of it. Let's put on your salesman hat, because you are one, and let me know. I mean, I spent some time in Detroit, okay, and I did advertising and communications for car companies, and I met quite a bunch of, shall I say, silver-tongued devils. People in the car business, they call themselves iron peddlers. But you know, there was everything from the attitude of, by the way, that's my money in your pocket. You just don't know it. But what should be the mindset of, yes, okay, a salesperson, presumably they're on commission. Uh, and the more high powered they are and the more high ticket the item, the more commission is likely to figure into it and motivate them. And they got to pay the bills. They got mortgage. Maybe they got family and kids. So sure, they're motivated to make a sale. But what should be the mindset? Well, again, coming back to business ethics, what do you think that let's say the moral profile of a salesman should be?
That's a big question. We could probably ask a few other additional questions to it and discuss this for a long time. I'm going to start a little bit backwards here and tell you that ethics start with the individual. Okay. So whatever your personal or my personal ethics are, they're going to show up. So if I'm out there wanting to make a quick buck, that's going to show up. It's, you know, it may not be completely obvious when consumers go to it. It come to me initially. It's going to be very clear by the time we're even halfway through a transaction. And, you know, so what should it be? First of all, it's always working on yourself to be the best person, to be of service to a person who is looking for a home. And I've seen attitudes, I'll just go there for a second, of colleagues whom I actually appreciate, who would say, oh, you know, I'm not going to deal with anybody who has, I don't know, $500,000 to spend. Because in San Francisco, it's not easy to find, if you find anything, okay? You find a dog hut, maybe, a little bit, and that's hard for that. And I mean, there are some properties that can be had, and I'm not sure our audience is probably in different parts of the country, and therefore,
and the world,
right, and therefore those values, what I just mentioned, they're probably going, what? And that's fine. The thing is that no matter which market one is in, always consider that there are people who have a certain amount of dollars to spend, and that may put them into a lower bracket, but as everybody else's. That's one thing. And the other thing is that just because it may not be a lot of money to a realtor, right, or to someone who goes into a market, into a certain market, it doesn't mean to those people. You still need to be of service to them, and help them assess how they can move forward with what they have. Now, if you're on the other side and you have a client who has millions of dollars, there's a whole different part to that. Usually people who have a lot more money are very demanding. They believe that they are the center of the universe often, and that's what people earn their commission with. So that's, you know, those kinds of things. But in terms of morals, I think it's to map it all the way across. I will just say that it is such, it's you know, if you were to interview me as an agent, you'd want to know, well, how responsive are you? Will you be there when a problem shows up, when the negotiations need to be done? Because guess what? A lot of folks simply disappear. And that always boggles my mind, because we're in a sales profession. It's similar. I'll just say this. If I send you anybody to Zillow and you put in whatever you want to find on Zillow, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 different agents show up in the sidebar usually, or you're looking for an agent specifically and you want to find who's serving my area. If you call all those agents, or if you reach out to them, sometimes you hear back from one person. Sometimes you hear back from no one. Well, that's an indication of what you can expect when you're actually doing business with them.
It's kind of like pitching agents, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, it just boggles my mind how a profession that relies on providing service and value to clients, how people will not even pick up the phone to call you back.
Well, the thing about as I can think of it from, and I've been on both sides of it. I mean, I have certainly been in sales roles before, but as a consumer, it really comes down to an interpersonal level. You know, I'm picking up on what you're saying about that impression, you know, that gut feel.
Yeah.
And whether it's a sales transaction, I mean, you know, we could have a whole other conversation about, are all human relationships transactional? Because and it's even been kind of a favorite topic of mine, that unconditional love is transactional, because it kind of lets me off the hook of having to worry about you, what you're doing tomorrow. But if I'm going to sit down with you and I did not know you before, and you're going to be my real estate broker, there is that gut feeling of, who is this person? I mean, am I looking at a performance? Is she following a script? Is this a persona that she puts on, and there's another mask that, you know, she puts on in the evening for her and the cocktail party, or, you know, whoever she's sitting down with. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll say this: I think that on the one hand, as a consumer, whether it be a real estate broker or someone who's selling a refrigerator, or even somebody in the local market, I think if someone's in a sales position, we do tend to give them some rope. Because
very true. And I think so. Piggybacking on what you're saying here, you know, what a person looks like on their profile, and when you know, is sometimes very misleading. You don't know until you actually speak with them. So I'll tell you a little joke I have, which is, how come realtors and brokers are the actors, the other actors? You know, so you are living in Southern California, and, you know, one thinks of all these actors who are looking for work and all of that, and they must have a certain persona they're projecting. So they have business cards with their photos, you know, their mugshot on them, and realtors do, mm-hmm. which is the only profession I know of that actually has a photo on its business cards.
Because
so
it's so
that
much
by itself will tell you something about the profession.
It's so much a personal connection. That's right. And I think also there may be the thought that, okay, if I'm female and 25 and attractive, then there's a certain customer that might be interested in working with me. If I'm more like me, and, you know, I have to add a little color to my hair, then, you know, is there an element of trust there? I don't know.
There is. So a picture will tell you something, but it will not tell you how competent the person is, whether they're actually standing up for you or just interested in making money, whether they're going to be available to you, whether they have the skill to handle all the different parties in a transaction. There sometimes are 30 plus parties involved in a business, in a real estate transaction. So that's a lot of parties. Yeah. And it's the realtor who gets to deal with all of them, not the consumer. So, well, so that right there tells you need to have, in my opinion, a person who knows how to communicate, who is personable, and also knows how to say yes, no, or we can talk about that. We can take this to this party or whatever. So those are important components, but no picture will tell you that.
Well, as I say, in terms of giving the salesman rope, mm-hmm. What I'm meaning is, okay, I understand you're a salesperson, okay, and often there's a saying among salespeople that the best prospect for a salesperson is a salesperson because they appreciate a good pitch. But so in a way, I'm willing to make allowances because I understand what role you're in, and I understand that you want to do a deal. But I think where my decision would take place in terms of whether to go forward with you mm-hmm. would be, I really want to know whether you're hearing my needs.
Yes. Okay. So that's the other part I was going to say to talk about, which is so from the picture. Let's say you're talking with me on the phone, or we're meeting. At that point, you'd want to know two things. One, is this person listening to me? Big thing. And the reason you want to know that is exactly for understanding whether they know what your need is. Because if they don't understand it, they're going to send you to all kinds of things that are not appropriate. Now, sometimes your need may be different than what you think it is. So, but that's a conversation to, you have to start with what the client tells me, so if you tell me that here's what I want, here's what my resources are, etc., I'll ask you questions. I have a whole list of things I would ask you, while we're speaking, not like an interrogation, of course, but in the course of the conversation, I'd probably ask you, well, how are you envisioning this to happen? When do you want this to happen? All these parts, and if that doesn't work, what would work? So you want to go dig a little bit deeper.
You're getting to know that prospect as a person, and I've been out on real estate shopping tours, and the agent says to me, if you're willing to buy over here, I can get you one more bedroom for the same amount of money.
Right.
Now, that comes right down to, do I have a big family? do I need that extra room for my macrame? I mean, this is.
I didn't know you did macrame.
Well, yeah. And that's topic for another show. Keep your, the idle hands, the devil's playground. So, but I also, I was very intrigued by this book of yours, The Art and Science of Real Estate Negotiation, because when I actually flew a desk, some people would accuse, as a book author, they'd accuse me of being semi-retired. But back when I actually flew a desk, I had to do business-to-business contracts for software development, and often it would take a week of hashing out each paragraph on the. I mean, certainly there would be the so-called boilerplate, or there would be the contract form that came over from their attorneys, or that you know, or it might be the form that's usually used as is often in, let's say, a rental contract in the real estate business. But, you know, I would be on with my opposite number who probably wasn't an attorney, probably a manager at the other company. Okay. And we'd be talking through the terms point by point. And in each case, it would be what's in our interest, what can we get, what, not only what's reasonable, but what is, well, yes, what's the best we can do? What is the best we can do for us for this? But also, we want somehow to get value out of this. And if we pull all of the motivation out of their side, you know, what kind of a quality job are we going to get? But one of the things I found was that after all this, there were some customers customers, but also vendors that I dealt with, that once it was signed, that was a fundamental basis of our relationship. We understood exactly what was expected. We had a plan of work, and then there was an order that came out of it, and a schedule and deliverables and all that. There were others that I dealt with, and interestingly enough, and I don't want to throw any rocks here, but they were doing British contracts to stipulating the High Court of England. It seemed they put the contract in the drawer and simply forgot about it. And they did whatever they did.
You mean they didn't deliver on the contract?
No, it wasn't that they didn't deliver. It was that, okay, you know, we had agreed to these deviations from the way that they usually do things. Mm-hmm. Okay, now some of that has to do, I didn't know that in Great Britain, at least at the time, you could stipulate that a human life was worth $2 million. Period. That's
it is.
You know, and you know, the United States, no, absolutely not. That's up to a jury, and that's how you get, you know, $50 million contracts. But tell me, Gabrielle, in terms of the actual contract negotiation, actually, when you and I spoke a week ago, we did touch on some of these things, of things that you've encountered in terms of the way that business transactions can go, do go, should go.
What would you like to know? I mean, it's a big topic. I'm happy to address certain aspects.
No. But we were actually specifically, yes. Here was my favorite, not my favorite thing I disliked the most, was what I would call sharp lawyering. Okay, and I would see a contract that was written almost deliberately to be nasty. And the idea was, it wasn't that they wanted to be nasty, but their lawyer thought, okay, if you find a lawyer that's as good as me, you're you're going to see this stuff and try to negotiate it away. But if you don't, I got you.
Well, let me talk about real estate contracts in the context that you just mentioned, which is you know, the legal context. I mean, contracts obviously are legal instruments. And what the first thing I need to do is to give you a disclaimer on this show, because in the state of California, and probably in other states in this country, I, as a realtor, cannot give you legal advice, period. Okay. And that, but that's it's a legal profession. And I know the contract, and I can explain certain things. But if you're digging into all the different language of the contracts, at that point, I have to tell you what I just did, which is unless I have a JD, I'm also a lawyer. Okay, so that's so if I'm also a lawyer, that's different.
It's not just, I mean, I can, you know, maybe play one on TV, but you actually are one.
No, I'm not. I don't have that degree.
Okay,
and that's
all right.
why I have to give you the disclaimer. Okay.
I understood.
Right.
I will consult a certified professional before I act on anything that you say.
Right. So please. So basically, what
I know you have opinions about this.
I'm sure there are lots of opinions about it, because what happens is this. I'll just give you an example. I think I probably mentioned it to you once before a while ago, and that is I've had lawyer clients, right? So I have had clients who were lawyers by profession. Now, they were not real estate lawyers. They were, in all kinds of other specialties in the law. And they engaged me as their realtor, okay, either to buy or to sell or to do both. And here is what I've found over the years with lawyer clients. Those who actually understand the power of contracts, meaning that they're, for instance, the California, San Francisco real estate contract or the California real estate contract, which are legal forms, right? Put out by the associations. They have been vetted by legal experts, meaning a lot of the things that are in those contracts have gone to courts, and now they're in the contracts to make sure that whatever the courts decided show up in this contract. So the consumer has certain protections because of that. So these contracts have been vetted over years, because this is, it's not a process of a few weeks or months, it's years. And in the 80s, for instance, you would have a contract that was very, very simple. Well, no longer so. So the first thing is that a lawyer who understands that is not going to do sharp lawyering on it, because it's not in their interest, because anything you have to vet again or you want to rewrite takes forever to do. Even if that person wants to do it him or herself, it still needs to be done with another competent or several other competent professionals, which at the end of the day means that this person will never ever either buy or sell a home with that approach, because everybody else is going to use the contract I just talked about, which is a standard contract, which still can be negotiated. There are parts of those contracts that are completely, you need to know what you're looking at, and you need to also then say, well, I could approach it, I could do, we could ask for this or this. So there's still negotiation possible, but it's not, you're not rewriting the whole contract. So I'm starting with a lawyer or lawyers who understand that, and they will know to use that contract, and they will go with my take on it, saying, okay, we need to use that because otherwise you'll never buy or sell anything. Okay, so
I think you made, what I'm hearing there between the lines, and it echoes the conversation we had before, which I think is a really good practical point, is that when you're talking about these clauses that have been worked out so carefully over time to have a very specific meaning in a court.
Yes.
That your point, I believe, was that when a judge sees that language, they know it right away. If they're a judge that hears a lot of real estate stuff, okay,
yes,
and they're, or an attorney on the other side,
right,
that okay, they know, don't push back against that, because that's kind of subtle law. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's case law, actually. I mean,
now the thing about, there's of course a fine line to that, because some of those things could be done better.
They could be relitigated.
It's not, it's not for the consumer, whether it's a lawyer or a doctor, whoever it is, to rewrite that, because that actually needs to be vetted through a court, and usually that's through a lawsuit that's initiated by someone. So that's the way it works.
I'll give you an example of something that I ran into, and it is exactly the point you're talking about. Is in almost every contract you'll see that clause, the jurisdiction clause.
Yes.
That said, if usually the drafter of the contract is going to pick their own jurisdiction. So, if it's somebody in San Francisco, they say, well, if there's arbitration, it's going to be done in the San Francisco whatever the mediation arm is, under the laws of the state of California. Well, of course, if I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm signing this contract, I don't really want to travel to California
Right.
so that's going to cost me. I'd like to get the jurisdiction changed. Well, the likelihood of you're getting the jurisdiction changed
Yeah,
on
it's
a contract that
nil.
somebody else has drafted and somebody that you want something from is like 0 to none. But when I had and again, not legal advice, but I had when I was a young man, I had a contract with somebody I very much wanted to do business with, and yet it was a contract that they used over and over and over again. And so I went to a relatively inexpensive and I suppose inexperienced attorney to review the contract, because I mean I didn't want to pay $500 an hour. And so this guy's only comment was, well, try to get the jurisdiction changed to the state of California. And when I expressed this to the other side, it took them about 5 minutes to stop laughing. It was like, who is this guy who had advised you? He's just out of law school.
So to put this into a more palatable way for a consumer, because not every consumer is a lawyer, not every, so how does that apply to them? It actually protects them, and it gives them, meaning the consumer, or consumers, the option to be competitive in markets that are very, very competitive often. So, rewriting the contract is not the best use of anybody's time, aside from it actually not accomplishing much.
Well, what about, Gabrielle? What about in terms of the interaction? Okay, we've spent some time looking at properties, and I've decided on one, and you helped me write the contract, and I engaged you because I feel in my heart of hearts that people in your profession provide value and earn their money, because there's a lot of stuff that you could be protecting me from that would, if I did it by myself, it could, might not turn out well. But beyond that, okay, now we're in the final phases of, we're doing the inspection.
Right.
Okay, and we're looking at the inspector's report, with all the warts and all that may be in this property. And yet, I've already told you I'm kind of a fan of, of craftsman architecture. So, I know I'm not going to be buying this glass and steel house that has, 0 flaws. But what would be some examples of going that extra mile, things that are not in the contract?
In terms of the inspection? Well,
no. In terms of simply you and your role as a salesperson and helper, if you will.
Oh, I see. Well, before that contract is ever written, I should be worth my weight in gold to you. And I mean that because there's a lot of research, a lot of legwork involved in not just finding the house. Now, I will back up here for a second, because I've encountered, over the last 20 years, many people just go online and say, that's the place I want. And, I just want you to write the contract or whatever, and then take me through the process. But you still, even if that's the case, it's important to, before ever writing an offer, in a place like San Francisco, you have a lot of competition for very few properties. Let's say I represent you as a buyer and you want this one property. So I have to do my work right for you to be able to tell you, okay, here is what needs to happen, or what you need to know to make a competitive offer. And by the way, most people think that's all about money. It's like, I'm going to tell you to go up $100,000 or something, and I'm here to tell you, yes, money is important, and most sellers are looking for the highest dollar amount they want. But I will also tell you that if you've done your homework, there's a lot of negotiation room. So if you go, I, for instance, go and look at the property, I talk with the other side, I talk with the agent for that property. That's usually a very important conversation because I know which way they're positioning themselves. And that doesn't show up on the MLS. Now you can only tell if someone's only for the about the money, then that's pretty easy to tell usually. Yeah, well, but most people are not that black and white.
I've had realtors who certainly something in the inspection that needs to be done.
Yes.
A termite treatment or something like that. They're certainly going to follow through on that. But I mean, certainly I have this one fellow, he called himself the samurai realtor. He kept saying, I live to serve. And often I've said to Reverend Kevin, when it comes as a storyteller, yes, I live to serve. But if it was a matter of, it didn't really come up on the inspection report, but that washing machine is looking like it's from the 1950s, and even the Maytag repairman wouldn't touch that again. Maybe we can get them to, maybe we can get them to either put a new one in there, or maybe they'll give you a $500 allowance so that you can get a new one yourself.
Well, that's definitely the case. Now, see, depending on, so if that seller has, let's say, 10 to 20 offers and you're one of them, unless you're the highest bidder, I would probably tell you, yeah, you can ask, but it's unlikely the seller is going to tell you.
You're putting on that practical hat again, because I've heard in this market that there are people, lining up, and it's like, okay, well, it's like during COVID, with the shortage of the chips to make the computers for the cars evidently were in short supply, and it was like, okay, well, how much over sticker do you want to pay? Are you willing to pay?
Right.
In the housing market, in many ways, and I think that this is true to some extent. Nationally, I mean, there are places where I know, for example, there was a big corporation here in Los Angeles. They were planning to move the whole works to McKinney, Texas, and we're talking about thousands of employees. And I don't know. I think the city eventually talked them out of it somehow.
They probably gave them a tax break.
Yeah. No, and then also, yes, I had dealt with. I had met an industrial executive in I forget where the company was headquartered, but they needed this was in Detroit. The problem was suddenly they had a whole lot more orders than they could fulfill. I mean, we're talking about a lot of orders. And this was about the time that they were downsizing cars, and these were not cheap parts. Okay, this was multi-millions of dollars that if they didn't find a way, and it was a long-term contract. I think it was a 10-year contract. So it wasn't like they had to produce the parts tomorrow, but they had to be able to ramp up over 3, 5, 10 years to be able to deliver to the big car maker what they needed. So this guy found, his staff had done a study, and they realized that this particular part of upstate New York it had the it had the right infrastructure, electricity capacity, the water, all this other stuff that they need, the highway system, the rail siding. And it turned out, and I didn't know this before, but I know it's very common, there's a thing called New York State Industrial Revenue Bonds.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
And for if you've got a factory, actually, I think this is what happened when Amazon tried to go to Long Island. Because I'm not sure did that go through? I don't remember. I know that they were going to locate a major depot out on Long Island, and I'm not sure whether that came into fruition. But yes, there are these huge incentives, and the same is true of uh, even more so of cities, international cities wanting to host the Olympics. I mean, you know, there have to be, okay, well, we're going to build a new stadium for this.
Well, usually it's about it's not just the infrastructure; it's about creating jobs for that community.
Oh,
At least that's the way it's presented. Whether that actually turns out to be the case or not, that's a whole different thing. And whether there's enough, not just revenue coming in, but enough to sustain those employees for, you know, for the jobs, because employees need housing. So that's one of the things that happened in San Francisco, you know, with the with the big tech boom. San Francisco, all the Silicon Valley companies hired people that were about a decade younger than they had been a decade before, and none of those wanted to live in the suburbs. So they all moved their headquarters or branch offices into San Francisco and flooded San Francisco with all these wonderful young people. But essentially, what happened was that it displaced a lot of other people because those folks who came in who were in tech made 100,000 plus salaries for you know, at age 25, and some of them became millionaires, etc. I mean, without going into the whole story, some of you have probably read it already, read some of those components, and they started bidding up rents. They started bidding up property values, you know, because they all have to live somewhere. So, so that's,
well, you know,
the city did not consider.
You're touching on a somewhat wider topic, but something that we've often I've often discussed with Reverend Kevin is this time honored question that, you know, comes up again and again. You know, why do bad things happen to good people? And the thing that you made me remember here is that I was living here in Santa Monica during the last big earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was the Northridge Quake, but somehow the shockwave went under the mountains, and it hit most intensely along that there's a strip of very upscale up there in the north end of town, and actually the shockwave was so strong that the capstone of the Catholic Church, which is about a block, about half a ton, fell onto the sidewalk. It was that powerful.
Yeah.
And somebody told me later, and I don't remember whether that was somebody who was in construction or in real estate, and they said, yeah, things really started to turn around then. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you know, we were in a local recession about that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Things were really not going well. And what happened was that the banks and the insurance companies poured redevelopment money into this town, and the contractors, and no doubt the local, you know, Lowe's and Home Depot and Sears, and, you know, that caused employment, that caused, you know, people to have disposable income, and, you know, contracting jobs, manual labor jobs, you know, those are extremely volatile and rise and fall with the housing market, and and as you know, with the disposable income of the people that you're selling the houses to. You know, if you're going to sell somebody into a house and they got 2 nickels left, okay, they're going to have to either get turn right around and get a home equity loan to put that extra whatever it is in that they really want.
So I'll just say this to that particular topic. Sorry for interjecting. I, you know, when I consult with someone who wants to engage me, often the person has a certain income, etc. And when we actually look at what they can do, yeah, they might be able to squeeze and buy a home, but I usually tell them, you know, do you want to eat peanut butter sandwiches for the next several years, and you know, just to own a home? You know, so renting is underrated sometimes. So I'll just say that, okay, and that is an industry default, because we're all being told we must own a home and we should own a home. But actually, coming back to what something you said earlier, you know, investors and corporations and banks are purchasing homes by the hundreds. Berkshire Hathaway is among those. They have a huge arm just purchasing single family homes, because they realize that the current buying real estate is going to be a luxury product for most people. It's not what it used to be for the average American. It is for people who have plenty of cash, and that's going to be the wave of the future. Now, some of them, you know, while we had lower interest rates, which now is that's gone, well, it's still lower than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But by a lot.
I read the headline the other day, 5%. But I mean,
yes,
I
but
remember,
I mean, compared to,
I remember 7.5.
Right. What it does, though, is that it immediately eliminates a good number of buyers. So and how this ties into these corporate entities buying up those homes. They saw that a while back. They've been buying up these homes to rent them, and then eventually some of them are doing, you know, rent-to-own programs. All of that. Rent-to-own programs are great, but always remember they're going to make their money. So they're going to make a tidy profit.
Let our viewers know where they can reach out to you and find out more about your book.
All right. Well, you can reach out to me via, well, first of all, the books are on Amazon. I kind of hate to say it, but Amazon is unfortunately one of the very important venues for authors, especially. Yes.
Topic for another show.
Yes, it is. Yes. So you can find the books there. There are 4 of them. I only I have the latest one right in front of me. Can you see it? Yeah.
Yeah, and that self-directed IRA. From reading the book, yes. I realized that is something special, and you can't buy real estate and put it into just any IRA. So correct. Yes, if you want the answer to that, get Gabrielle's book. And so now, if you'll permit me, I do have to wrap it up. I'd like to share something of a, I don't know whether you call it an anecdote or just storytelling, but you know, we were talking about business ethics, and actually a seminar. That was a seminar actually where I met Gabrielle years ago. One of the things that was expressed was that personal power and personal credibility can come out of honesty and scrupulous honesty. And what was meant by that? The way that I interpreted that and the way that I acted on that was, you know, if I was at lunch, I was having business lunch with someone, and I talked about, well, did you read such and such a book? And it was not mine. I mean, I actually at the time I was writing a lot of books. Did you read such and such a book? And you know, the person would say, no. Well, let me tell you about it. You know, this really got me jazzed, and it did a lot for me. And well, it was entertaining or lesson learned, whatever it happens to be. And so, but then the next day, I would walk into that person's office and I would put that book on their desk. Okay, so I'd created an expectation. I had in a way I'd made a promise, and the person might not have. Most people might have assumed, oh well, you know, that'll be the end of that. But no, Gerald brought me the book the next day. And I remember the person in my life who was the best example of unconditional love, I think, was my maternal grandmother. And they had given me a pellet gun. I would often I would often spend the weekend with them, and I was allowed to practice with that in the basement, shoot against targets against a concrete wall, not nice and safe. Except I was down there by myself, and I was kind of waving the gun around. Maybe I was pretending to shoot at the sky or something, and one of the pellets went right through the glass window. Okay. My grandfather got home, who was someone who, he was a strong man, he was a compassionate man, but he expressed himself in very strong terms. And my grandmother was a very soft-spoken woman. And he came home and he said, "What happened to the window?" And I didn't open my mouth. And my grandmother said, "You know, Papa, I don't know." She knew. And it was like cold water running down my back. It's like, she's going to take the rap for me. I can't let her do that.
Did you speak up?
She expects me to say the 3 words, "I did it." And I tell you, I can't remember whether I did. But I remember to this day the fact that she was willing to stand up to me for him, and it caused such shame, such love. But I don't know whether I learned the lesson that day, but I think it did. I think it did go down, because it's still a story that I tell. And
learning lessons is hard.
Well, her name was Pearl, and it's just there's a whole story with that. This was, again, Southern Missouri, where my books are set. But yeah, I mean, she asked me to take out the garbage one day, and she said, and I said, "Grandma, I don't want to." And she said, "Well, your Uncle Bill, when he was growing up, he would say, 'Mama, I don't want to, but I will.'" So again, there were never any harsh words from Pearl. It was always the, I won't say iron fist and velvet glove. It was a velvet fist. It was softball all the way. But oh, how I loved her, and she had a whole set of encyclopedias, and sometimes she would just be in the kitchen baking pies, and she'd spend hours doing that, and it's like, just amuse yourself however you can, and you got the run of the house. And I'd sit there and I'd pull the encyclopedias down, and I would just read the encyclopedia. So I had great fun. But Gabrielle, thank you so much for being with us today, and hope we can have you on again.
Thank you again, and yeah, I wish you a wonderful weekend. It's Easter weekend, isn't it? Yeah.
It's good to be with you on Good Friday.
Yeah.
Reverend Kevin says every Friday is a happy Friday, but every Friday is happy and good.
So where is Reverend Kevin?
I think he's at the controls.
Okay.
He has a lot on his plate these days, but he's been very generous in allowing us to be on the air. And
well, thank you, please.
And I will thank you. Our heart goes out, and to you watching us out there. Until the next time, this will be Thinking About Thinking next Friday. Thank you.
Thank you again.